From regular swords and daggers to scythes and rocket launchers? These are all 84 Zanpakutos in Bleach. All Zanpakutos in the show are split into two main categories, Keto type and Power type. I'll cover the Keto type first, which are Zanpakutos that mostly rely on specific special abilities in battle, instead of close-range combat. And there are a few subcategories. Let's start by covering three illusion types first. 𝐂𝐫𝐴𝐲'𝐬. The series' titular antagonist, Sosuke Aizen, is the wielder of the 𝐂𝐫𝐴𝐲'𝐬, a Zanpakuto with a green handle that allows him to hypnotize anyone who sees the blade at the exact moment it's released. After seeing it just once, the person will completely succumb to the hypnosis every time it's released, regardless of how long ago they saw it. This ability is perfect for combat, as Aizen can create a decoy of himself in order to hide his own movements and attack with impunity. This Zanpakuto's Shikai is so strong that Aizen never even felt the need to reveal his Bankai. 𝗲𝗏𝗏. 𝗲𝗏𝗏 belongs to Shinji Hirako, the current captain of the 5th Division and the de facto leader of the Vizard Group. He's a brilliant tactician with a sharp mind who enjoys messing with people's heads. That's why 𝗲𝗏𝗏's abilities perfectly embody the essence of his character. Its Shikai form turns the hilt of the blade into a large ring that lets him spin it and release pink mist. Everyone who smells this mist will fall victim to optical illusions. This ability completely disorients the victim and reverses their sense of direction. Up becomes down, forward becomes backward, and so on. However, it's not just the sense of direction that's changed. The opponent's eyesight, direction of incoming attacks, and injury locations are also inverted. 𝗲𝗏𝗏's Bankai is similar to its Shikai, but it brings this ability to a whole different level as it allows Shinji to target everyone in the area. The only person not affected is Shinji himself, who hides inside of a giant golden flower. Everyone affected by this Bankai will mistake allies for enemies, which can cause the entire group of opponents to slaughter each other without hesitation. And the last illusion type Zanpakuto is 𝐵𝐵𝐴𝐻. It belongs to one of the Vizards, Rose. While sealed, 𝐵𝐵𝐴𝐻 features an orange handle and a diamond-shaped handguard. He can use his Zanpakuto to wrap a wire around his opponents and crush them with it. In its Shikai form, the blade becomes a gold extendable whip with a flower on the end. Once the whip wraps itself around an enemy, it can be used to deliver powerful shockwaves that destroy everything in the vicinity. 𝐵𝐵𝐴𝐻's Bankai pretty much turns Otoribashi into a composer who uses two giant hands to control an army of gold beings. These beings can then use magic to cast realistic illusions that are powerful enough to injure or even kill people. The only way to counter this technique is by rupturing your own eardrums like Superstar did during their fight. Okay, some of these Zanpakutos were really cool, but there's still 81 different Zanpakuto left to cover, and let's continue with the poison type. 𝐵𝐫𝐸. The mad scientist and captain of the 12th Division, Mayuri Korotsuchi is a person with a ton of tricks up his sleeves, and within his arsenal of tricks is his Zanpakuto, 𝐵𝐸𝐸. In its Shikai form, the blade looks like a trident, and it has the ability to sever the enemy's connection between their brain and the body if they're stabbed by it. This renders his foes basically immobile, and even if they heal the wound, the effect will not immediately disappear. When its Bankai is activated, the baby head featured on the blade's guard lets out a giant caterpillar that can breathe poison into the air. The poison reaches around 200 meters around the Zanpakuto, and it can even be absorbed by a person's skin. The Arrancar Zyalaporo was quite a formidable enemy up until he was slain by this Zanpakuto's ridiculous abilities. But even that's not all, because with his skills, Mayuri was also able to modify his Zanpakuto's Bankai and turned it into a giant pink-skinned baby, capable of countering any of his opponent's abilities when given the necessary information. Mayuri successfully used this technique to counter seemingly unstoppable compulsory ability while battling against the left hand of the Soul King. Next on the list is projectile types, and there's only one of these, Zunzaki Garasu. It belongs to Jidanbo's little brother, Jirobo Ikanzaka. It has a purple-gray handle and a handguard that looks like the number 8. Jirobo can use his Shikai to create flying blades that look like his Zanpakuto. He can then manipulate them and send them flying at his opponents at great speeds. The living types. Let's start with Tenkin. Tenkin belongs to the former 7th Division captain Sajin Kamamura. In its Shikai form, Tenkin can create various body parts of a fearsome armored giant. These body parts copy whatever Kamamura does. For example, should Kamamura swing his sword, a gigantic arm wielding a sword appears and mimics the movement. And although this ability is already really powerful, Tenkin's Bankai brings it to a whole nother level. When activated, instead of controlling separated body parts, the entire armored giant spawns that Kamamura can control. It's strong enough to take a released Arrancar's point-blank Seto without being damaged, and could easily smother him with its bare hands. This Bankai also has another form where the armored giant completely removes his armor, exposing a body composed of nothing but pure Reiatsu. The giant looks demonic in this form and is pretty much invulnerable to physical attacks. 𝐴𝐻𝐿 Rindo's Zanpakuto. Atao Rindo is the lieutenant of the 7th Division, and in Shikai form, his blade turns into a segmented whip. These segments resemble Shikigami talismans and are attached to each other by small loops. With it, Rindo can use different attacks by naming a different species of animals with sign language. The only animals we saw Rindo summon were hawks, and they were strong enough to strip even a gigantic being like Jigoku no Gaki to its bones in seconds. 77 blades left to go, and now let's cover the biggest category so far, the fire-type Zanpakutos. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐺𝐸. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐺𝐸 was Yamamoto's Zanpakuto, and it had the most offensive power, greater than any other blade in the Soul Society. While sealed, it resembles a wooden cane, but once unleashed, this blade can cause ripples all across the Serete. In its Shikai form, 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗺𝗁 creates flames with so much intensity that they can instantly burn opponents to dust with a single swing. It can also create a wall of flames and giant flame pillars that trap and burn enemies. However, its Bankai form is even more intimidating as it allows Yamamoto to use 4 different overpowered abilities. One of these techniques is achieved by focusing all heat onto the tip of the blade, which allows Yamamoto to channel the heat of the sun and easily reduce objects to nothing. Another technique allows him to engulf himself and the surrounding area with heat that reaches 15 million degrees Celsius. But even that's not all, because for some reason, Yamamoto can also call upon the corpses of the dead who were killed by his flames to come forth and fight on his behalf. And the last Bankai technique of his Zanpakuto literally allows Yamamoto to perform a slash of concentrated fire and wipe out anything he slashes from existence. So yeah, this blade is the definition of overkill, and its full potential was seen during Yamamoto's fight against Yhwach, 𝗕𝗲𝗰. 𝗕𝗲𝗰 belongs to one of the 𝐿𝐵𝑖𝑍𝑒𝑟s, 𝗲𝗲. It has a white handle and a heart-shaped handguard. 𝗕𝗲𝗰 in its Shikai form transforms into a large bat covered with blades that resemble a Japanese kanabo. The blade can also channel and shoot huge fireballs that are powerful enough to destroy buildings. Love can even use 𝗕𝗲𝗰 to deflect 𝗕𝗲𝗄 Setos as he did with Starks during the fake Karakura town arc. The blade's Bankai is still a mystery. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗍. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗍 is Momohina Mori's Zanpakuto. Although we don't see much of this blade's true potential, we do know that it's a fire-type blade that turns into a double-edged weapon with prongs on it. Like a Seto, 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝗍's Shikai can send out fireballs that explode on impact. Only 3 more fire-type Zanpakutos are left, and one of those is 𝐿𝐵𝑇𝑠u. 𝐿𝐵𝑇𝑠u is the Zanpakuto wielded by Ichigo's father, Isshin. It looks like an ordinary Tachi with a red handle. In its Shikai form, the blade remains the same but can generate powerful flames on command. Isshin is also capable of using Getsuga Tensho engulfed in his sword's flames. When he used it against Aizen, 𝗕𝗫𝑇𝑠u left a huge crater behind and practically eviscerated an entire chunk of the fake Karakura town. In his current form, Isshin can't release his Bankai. 𝐿𝐵𝑇𝑠u. 𝗔𝗓𝗏 was the 𝗕𝗲𝗄 who wielded 𝐿𝐵𝑇𝑠u, and his resurrection ability turned him into some kind of alien-like being. In this form, he loses almost all form of sentience, but gets regeneration, durability, and strength buffs in exchange for that. As the only modified 𝗕𝗲𝗄 in existence, 𝗔𝗓𝗏 was made with the sole purpose of nullifying Yamamoto's abilities, which he managed to successfully do. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Ēdric a mask that resembled wings and a covered for his arms and hands. In this form, Ēdric gets the power to use flame attacks that are incredibly strong. He almost managed to kill Ikaku with one of his attacks and was strong enough to shatter his Bankai. The next are Ice-type Zanpakutos, and although there's only 2 of them in the series, both are insanely powerful. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐺𝐺. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐺𝐺 belongs to the Isshin's former lieutenant, the current captain of the 10th Division, Toshiro Hitsugaya. It's a powerful Zanpakuto that features a star-shaped headguard while it's sealed. Toshiro's Shikai gave him the power to manipulate water and ice, which he can then turn into a whip in the shape of a dragon that freezes enemies on contact. We've seen him use this technique on several enemies leading up to the 1000-year Blood War arc. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐺𝐺's incomplete Bankai gives Toshiro wings and a tail made of ice that allows him to fly. It also gives him the ability to constantly regenerate those wings and even use them as shields. Much like his Shikai, Toshiro can freeze objects and areas, though the radius and strength of the freezing is greater. Once Toshiro perfected his Bankai after 18 months of training, he gained the ability to physically alter his body and turn himself into an adult. This form of Bankai allows him to freeze concepts and powers instead of physical objects. An example of this is when Toshiro froze Gerard's sword, Hoffnung. He additionally froze the hope that powered the blade, rendering its damage reflection ability useless. 𝐳𝐴 no Shirayuki. 𝐳𝐴 no Shirayuki is another ice-type Zanpakuto that belongs to Rukia Kuchiki. The Zanpakuto has a maroon handle and a flame-like pattern on the side of the blade. It's considered one of the most beautiful blades in the Soul Society. In its Shikai state, Rukia can use her Shikai to freeze enemies at a distance or create a path made from ice mid-air. She can also create a circle to instantly freeze enemies and even the air itself. The interesting thing about this Zanpakuto is that it doesn't spread coldness from its blade. Its actual ability is to bring the body temperature of its wielder below freezing, which allows Rukia to perform her abilities. Sore no Shirayuki's Bankai completely changes Rukia's clothes and appearance, giving her a long, beautiful white robe made of ice. Rukia can use her Bankai to reach a temperature of absolute 0, which allows her to send out a massive wave of ice at her enemies and freeze them or anything else she touches instantly. With that one covered, there are exactly 69 Zanpakutos left, and 2 of those are Earth type. Tsuchinamazu. Tsuchinamazu is wielded by Kurumadani, a guy who replaces Rukia as the guardian of the areas around Karakura town. In its Shikai form, the blade turns into a round wheel that features a handle wrapped in blue fabric which has a bell hanging from it. He uses his Shikai to ignite the earth and launch spikes at people. He can also build a cage of earth to trap opponents in. Tachikaze. Tachikaze is an H-shaped Tsuba blade with a black sheath. It belongs to the powerhouse visored Kensei Mugurama. In its Shikai form, the blade looks like a combat knife and allows Kensei to manipulate wind in order to send out exploding slashes. He can even send out an energy blast by concentrating his air slashes, which are strong enough to blow an arm off of Ichigo's holified form. In its Bankai state, Tachikaze transforms from a single combat knife into a pair of large knuckle blades which Kensei holds in each hand. Also, purple bands wrap around Kensei's arms and back, resembling armor. In this form, Tekken can focus all his destructive power on its knuckle blades, and as a result, his punches release immense explosive force on impact. Water-type Zanpakutos. Pinza Aguda. Pinza Aguda was the Zanpakuto wielded by the Arrancar Findor Callias, and was last seen in action during the fake Karakura town arc. It was a simple blade with a pink handle that looked like a rapier while it was sealed. When it was awakened, the blade gave Findor crab-like pincer claws that covered both of his hands and armor across the right side of his body. The form enhanced his speed, strength, durability, and gave him the ability to launch concentrated energy from the tip of his claw. The destructive capabilities of his Seto in this form were enough to level almost an entire city. Findor can also use Pinza Aguda to manipulate and shoot out high-pressure water currents that can envelop and crush his enemies at a distance. Nejibana. Nejibana belonged to the former lieutenant of the 13th Division, Kaien Shiba. After being spun very fast, Kaien's Zanpakuto can transform into its Shikai form, which is a cross between a trident and a spear. Nejibana is a water-type Zanpakuto that allows Kaien to manipulate water and use it for slashing attacks like he did when he fought against the hollow Metastasia. Kaien died before ever achieving his Bankai. 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐴𝐴. 𝗕𝗲𝗰 belongs to arguably one of the most memorable Arrancars, 𝗕𝗲𝗰𝐴𝐵𝐴, and it's one of the coolest looking Zanpakutos. 𝗕𝗲𝗰 looks like a completely hollowed outline of a blade and a purple handle. In this state, it can generate and shoot energy projectiles, but things get much more interesting when it's awakened. In this state, it looks like a giant, very sharp shark tooth with gill markings and an unusual hilt. In this form, 𝗲𝗰𝐴𝐵𝐴 also gains the ability to manipulate water and turn it into projectiles that can either burn or cut her enemies in half. During her battle with Toshiro, 𝗕𝗲𝗰 was pretty useful when it came to holding the captain back and even overwhelming him at one point using her abnormal strength and mastery over water. Electricity-type Zanpakutos. Gonryomaru. Gonryomaru was another extremely powerful blade that belonged to the former lieutenant of the 1st Division, Chojiro Sasakibe. In its sealed state, the blade had a fanned handguard and a yellow handle. In its Shikai form, the blade turned itself into a rapier, and we know it was strong enough to even impale a younger Yhoubaha. With Gonryomaru, Chojiro can manipulate and generate electricity. Using Gonryomaru's Bankai, Chojiro can affect the weather and generate storm clouds which can create powerful bolts of lightning and send it towards his enemies. He also had the ability to form pillars of electricity around himself and use them to launch an attack with enough power to even permanently scar the legendary Ganryusai's forehead. And the last Keto category are wind-type Zanpakutos. There's only 2 of them, and one is Aguila. It belonged to the Arrancar Aberama Redder, who used it during the fake Karakura town arc. Once Resurrection was activated, this red katana transformed and gave Redder a red bird costume with an eagle mask over his head. It also gave him the ability to fly, enhanced strength, projectile feathers, and a wind-based moveset. He was slain by the 3rd Division Lieutenant Izurukida. Giralda. Dordoni Alessandro de la Sosacio was the wielder of Giralda, a katana with a purple hilt and a green sheath that could transform into large armor with horns and spikes growing out of it. In this form, Dodoni could use wind-based attacks and gained the ability to fly as well. He also animates cyclones as a bird-like weapon, generates tornadoes, and fires Seto blasts. He used his techniques against both Ichigo and Kensei, but his attacks weren't especially strong. Now before we move on to the next Zanpakuto category, there's still some Kido blades who don't fall into any of the subcategories we mentioned so far. So let's quickly cover them now. Nurihiro Kujaku. With its true form hidden away from his friends, Unichika Ayasagawa's Zanpakuto is quite a formidable blade. In its sealed state, it looks like just another average katana with a purple hilt and sheath, but the Shikai form turns it into a multi-blade sickle. In its Shikai form, the blade turns into a multi-blade sickle that Unichika can use to create long vines that ensnare his opponents at will and suck all of their spiritual energy. When the flowers bloom, this collected energy is turned against the opponent, either seriously incapacitating them or killing them in the process. Unichika can also chew on the flowers in order to recover his health. Since it's a hidden ability, Unichika has only used his Shikai properly once in the battle against 𝗕𝐲𝐴. Nurihiro Kujaku has no official Bankai state yet, Minazuki. Belonging to the former Kenpachi, Minazuki is Retsu Unohana's Zanpakuto. It basically resembles a greatsword in its sealed state and features a red handle with a golden oval tsuba. In its Shikai state, the blade transforms into a flying, one-eyed green manta ray that Unohana uses to fly around and heal other people. As innocent as it looks in its Shikai form, Minazuki can turn it into a terrifying weapon once Unohana sacrifices some of her blood in order to activate her Bankai. A torrent of vicious blood gushes out from the Zanpakuto and can be freely manipulated to deliver quick slashes or spheres for defense. With Minazuki equipped, Unohana was as strong as Zaraki for the most part, and she used her superior sword-wielding skills to keep the beast at bay for a considerably long time. Boasting that she only learned to heal in order to prolong her battles, she died in Zaraki's arms after she exhausted herself and was fatally wounded. 𝗵𝗕𝗕𝗄. 𝗵𝗕𝗕𝗄 has a really interesting sealed form, as it looks like a simple cane sword while it's sheathed. The sword belongs to an equally interesting character, the former 12th Division Captain Keisuke Urahara. In its Shikai form, the blade looks like a normal katana and is capable of producing and manipulating crimson energy to perform various techniques. For example, Urahara can launch crimson energy blasts, generate shields, cancel out strong enemy attacks, create a net to trap enemies with, and then light that net on fire and have it explode. As strong as it is already, 𝗵𝗕𝗕𝗄 also has a Bankai state that transforms it into a giant woman with dark hair and mannequin-like arms. This form allows Urahara to restructure anything at will, either for offensive or defensive purposes. He used this technique against Oskin and beat down the Quincy by restructuring his arm to be stronger. He also used it as a healing ability to fix his eyes. Suzumushi. Despite his great betrayal, Kaname Tozen was a fairly intimidating figure on the captain lineup. He wielded Suzumushi, a blade he attained after attending a funeral for one of his friends. This Zanpakuto resembles any regular katana, but what makes it unique is the fact that it has two Shikai commands. One of those commands makes Tozen's enemies pass out from a high-frequency noise, while the other allows the blade to create an afterimage of itself by vibrating super fast. In its Bankai form, Suzumushi can generate an impenetrable black void around itself using Tozen's rings. Tozen then uses that space to nullify his enemy's senses and spiritual energy. Although this technique is pretty powerful, one downside to it is that anyone touching the Zanpakuto's hilt is immune to these effects, so if Tozen's opponent manages to grab the blade, they'll recover their senses. On top of all that, Suzumushi also has a resurrection form that transforms Tozen into a black flying hollow-like creature that uses sound-based attacks. 𝗤𝗏𝗄 no Kotowari. For the longest time, 𝗤𝗏𝗄 no Kotowari was basically an inactive blade since it barely saw any action while it was wielded by the sickly Jushiro Ukitake. It had a red handle and a bronze crossguard while it was sheathed. In its rarely seen Shikai form, the Zanpakuto showed off a transformation that would turn it into two individual blades linked together with red chains. Ukitake can use 𝗤𝗏𝗄 no Kotowari to absorb an attack with the left blade, then channel that attack through the chain, making it stronger, then release it back at his opponents with the right one. He used his Shikai only once during the fake Karakura Town arc when he went up against the combined force of Lilynet and Stark. Unfortunately, he never revealed his Bankai, Katen Kyokotsu. As the blade that belongs to the Captain Commander of the Gotei 13, Shunsui Kyoraku, Katen Kyokotsu is a very powerful Zanpakuto that possesses some insane abilities. In its normal state, the blade is a pair of swords with dark blue handles, but as soon as Shunsui activates his Shikai, they turn into two Chinese scimitars. Katen's Shikai essentially allows him to make children's games real and force others to play them. The Zanpakuto makes the rules, and anyone who steps within the boundaries of its spiritual pressure is forced to play by those rules, including Shunsui himself. Some of these games that we've seen in the series are Kageoni, which is a game where whoever gets their shadow stepped on loses, and Ironi, a game where you can say a color and then deal damage proportional to how much of that color you're wearing. In Bankai state, Shunsui can change the mood of everyone around him, making everyone feel bleak, gloomy, and desperate. Some of these other Bankai abilities include sharing wounds with his opponent, competing with his opponent to see who can stay underwater longer until one of them drowns, and even cutting the opponent's throat with white thread. Despite how broken this Zanpakuto was, it's dealt far too much damage to Shunsui himself during his battles, and that's probably why we don't see him use it very often. 𝐲𝐫𝐴. Hanataro Yamada was a healer who wielded 𝐲𝐫𝐴. He's the guy that Ichigo found while running away from the 11th Division squad. This Zanpakuto is a katana with a blue handle that can heal anyone who gets slashed by it. In its Shikai form, 𝐲𝐫𝐴 looks like a small scalpel. Since Hinataro was a low-level Shinigami, he hasn't achieved Bankai yet. 𝗕𝐵𝐴. Izuru Kira is the 3rd Division Lieutenant and wielder of 𝗕𝐵𝐴. In its Shikai form, the blade of his Zanpakuto becomes straight and allows Izuru to double the weight of anything he strikes. This ability is cumulative as well, meaning Izuru can keep doubling the weight of the same object. Although the potential of this ability is limitless, a small number of strikes to an opponent's blade is usually all that's needed to render them completely immobile. It has no Bankai yet. 𝐿𝑖𝑛𝐻𝑎KYōKEN. The 𝐿𝑖𝑛𝐻𝑎KYōKEN is a Zanpakuto that wasn't developed by its wielder Nanao Ise. In fact, it was passed down to her since it's a sacred sword that belongs to her clan. Shunsui guarded it and eventually passed it down to her. The sword is only seen in its Shikai form and it features no blade. It's decorated with diamonds and some tassels. This supposedly broken sword can actually channel the ability of a god. During her death match with the Lille Barrow, Nanao used 𝐿𝑖𝑛𝐻𝑎KYōKEN's ability to reflect Lille's unstoppable attack back at him and completely disintegrate him. It's a rather dangerous Zanpakuto to have since any wrong moves can potentially wound the wielder as well. Only 5 more Kido blades are left until we move on to the next big category, and one of those is Shigarami. Belonging to Senjumaru Shutara, one of the members of Squad 0, Shigarami is a powerful Zanpakuto that allows her to sew her enemies in place using its Shikai needle form. It features an infinite amount of thread that Senjumaru uses to heal her allies by sewing their insides together. Shigarami can also alter a foe's clothing and inlay needles onto the fabric they wear. Her Bankai is just as impressive since it allows her to alter the space around her and create pocket dimensions with her fabrics. She used her Bankai to subdue all the 𝗕𝐻𝑎KYō members at the same time and was able to generate a pocket dimension that was tailored to each of their characteristics. Due to the overwhelming power of Senjumaru's Zanpakuto, her full power has to be sealed or the stability of all 3 worlds will be jeopardized. This is accomplished by Senjumaru linking her life with those of the other Royal Guard members, meaning that for her to be able to unleash her full power, at least 3 others must end their lives. Ichimonji. Belonging to one of the members of Squad 0, Yosei Ichibei, Ichimonji is a blade with a very broken ability. In its sealed state, it's pretty unique looking, as it resembles an oversized calligraphy brush. Even in this form, the blade has the ability to rename people or create barriers. For example, if Ichibei lands a blow on his opponent's arm, he can have its name to R, and as a result, reduce the physical capabilities of that arm by half. Yeah, it's pretty weird, I know. In its Shikai form, whenever Ichibei swings Ichimonji, its blade releases ink. Anything that this ink covers loses its name, and thus its powers. He can also suck away a person's life essence by drinking the color he's collected. Ichimonji's Bankai allows Ichibei to use the color white to rewrite a person's name with his Ichimonji. For example, by changing the opponent's name to Black Ant, his opponent would be as weak and powerless as an ant. One interesting thing about Ichibei's Bankai is that he activates it by calling out True Blade instead of Bankai, as Ichimonji was the first Zanpakuto to take on an evolved form long before the term Bankai even existed. 𝗕𝗲𝗏. 𝗕𝗲𝗏 belongs to one of the Tres Bestias, Emilu Apache. In its sealed state, her Zanpakuto looks like a pair of chakrams with protruding blades that she wears on each wrist. Her resurrection allows her to transform into a deer-like humanoid with giant antlers. This form enhances her base abilities and gives her the power to launch stronger 𝐵𝗲𝗏. 𝗕𝐵𝐴. 𝗕𝐒𝐫 Vega was the wielder of 𝗕𝗫𝗏, a Zanpakuto with a yellow handle and a double-edged straight blade. Once resurrection is activated, the blade gives 𝗕𝗫𝗏 a change of clothes with a striped design and fur on his feet and elbows. 𝗕𝗫𝗏 can use this form to launch teeth-like projectiles and can grow muscular when he's ready to battle. When that happens, his fur turns brown and his hands become giant teeth blades. He showed off this technique during his battle with Omaeda and Suifang during the fake Karakura town arc. 𝗕𝗏. 𝗕𝗏 belongs to the Yami Yargo, and once he taps into his resurrection form, the Zanpakuto transforms him into a giant who's capable of launching extremely powerful 𝗲𝗏s. He gets significant stat buffs all around and grows larger in size the angrier he gets. He put up quite a decent fight against Ichigo, Zaraki, and Byakuya, but inevitably met his demise soon after the captains teamed up against him. And finally, after 37 different Zanpakutos, all Kido types are now covered. However, with 47 Zanpakutos still left, we're moving on to the next category, Power Types. Power type Zanpakutos are designed specifically for melee combat and don't revolve around any Kido-based special abilities. The first one in this category is Zangetsu. Zangetsu, meaning slaying moon, used to be an artificial Zanpakuto that belonged to Ichigo before it shattered into pieces after clashing with Kenpachi. Eventually, Ichigo received the true Zangetsu, two separate, fully black blades with a cloth wrapped around the handles. Both Faux Zangetsu and its new twin version have been used throughout countless legendary battles that have shaped the future of the Soul Society. Ichigo mostly used the sword to launch strong melee and slashing attacks infused with his spiritual energy. Zangetsu can charge up and dish out attacks that are strong enough to even strike down Yahagawa infused with the Soul King's energy. His heaven-piercing attack gets further amplified once he fuses the two Zangetsu blades together in order to bring out his Bankai. Ichigo's Bankai is a fused sword that embodies his Fullbringer and Shinigami heritage. Even Yahagawa considered this weapon to be incredibly powerful and quickly broke it during his battle with Ichigo. During their second battle, however, only the white exterior of Zangetsu, which represents his Fullbringer side, shattered apart, leaving the Shinigami interior behind to deliver the finishing blow. 15 more power-type Zanpakutos are left, and let's continue with Nozarashi. Not only is Nozarashi one of the most powerful Zanpakutos in the series, but it's also one of the most mysterious. It belongs to the current Kenpachi and 11th Division commander Zaraki. Since he basically stole the sword from a dead Shinigami, Zaraki had no idea what his Zanpakuto's real name was. That was until he finally learned its name during his deadly fight against Unohana. In its dormant state, Nozarashi looks like a typical long sawtooth sword with a handle carved in cloth, which then turns into an intimidating battle axe that can cut through space itself. In its Shikai form, this Zanpakuto is incredibly intimidating to deal with, since Zaraki can pulverize an entire meteorite with it using only one strike. The only drawback of wielding this impressive blade is the huge power output it demands from the user. However, someone as powerful as Zaraki can easily handle it. Nozarashi even went toe-to-toe against Ichigo's Zangetsu on several occasions and was instrumental in bringing down the seemingly unstoppable 𝐲𝐴𝐵𝐴𝐿𝐼. Zabimaru. Zabimaru, meaning snake's tail in Japanese, and as the name suggests, it can be used like a whip to inflict heavy amounts of damage on opponents. This Zanpakuto belongs to Renji and is known to be the hardest to master compared to other blades wielded by lieutenants of the Soul Society. While its sheath, Zabimaru looks like a normal katana with a red handle and a red sheath. In its Shikai form, it can shred its opponents to pieces using the sharp protrusions that stick out of its blade. When Renji first met Ichigo, he gave the protagonist a rather tough time with only its Shikai form. In its Bankai form, this blade can deliver devastating, fatal blows using Renji's spiritual energy. The blade takes on the shape of a snake and gives Renji a cowl of green fur and a gauntlet on his right arm. During his battle with Mask Demaculin, Zabimaru's effectively burned the Quincy to ashes by biting down on him with its jaws made from powerful spiritual energy. Hozukimaru. Wielded by Ikkaku Madarame, one of Zaraki's lieutenants, Hozukimaru is a dangerous weapon that looks pretty much like a normal katana. Since Ikkaku is a power user like his captain, his attacks mostly consist of hack and slash tactics. To activate its Shikai form, Ikkaku slams its hilt, which transforms the sword into a spear with a wood shaft. Additionally, this spear can also break apart into a 3-sectional staff. This form shift makes the Zanpakuto perfect for both long-range and mid-range attacks. However, the most impressive is its Bankai, where it turns into 3 massive blades that are joined together by a chain. Aside from the increase in power, this Bankai is very unusual as it pretty much gets stronger as the battle goes on. After it's activated, Ikkaku's Reiatsu rises as the dragon crest on the side of the blade slowly fills with crimson dye. Once the crest is completely filled, Hozukimaru is at its full power. Although Ikkaku barely drew his matchup against Edred and even lost to Pao during the fake Karakura town arc, it's clear that his Zanpakuto has a lot of destructive potential. 𝐭𝐫𝐶. Shuhei Hisagi is a co-lieutenant of the 9th Division and the wielder of the funky-looking 𝐭𝐫𝐶. With it, he mostly uses basic power attacks and maneuvers around his opponents using blades chains. 𝐭𝐫𝐶's Shikai form turns the seemingly normal-looking katana into 2 scythes that each feature 2 blades. Between the 2 blades is a chain that connects them and can be used to either trap the opponent or extend the reach of Shuhei's attacks. Although Shuhei isn't a big fan of his Zanpakuto, he's still very proficient at using it and has yet to discover what his Bankai actually looks like. During the fake Karakura town arc, he took down several powerful hollows and even defeated an Arrancar, Findor. Isagi even managed to take out his own former captain Kaname Tozen with his Zanpakuto, after the latter betrayed the Soul Society and turned into one of Aizen's goons. 𝐵𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵 has a yellow handle and an octagonal guard, and it's used by Marachiyo Omaeda. Marachiyo's fighting style with a 𝐵𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐸𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵 as enemies and praying for the best. His Shikai blade also has a chain attached to it which he uses to recover the ball. Marachiyo hasn't achieved Bankai yet. Despite that, he still manages to do his job of protecting Suifeng rather well and has even fended off a couple of devastating hits from 𝐺𝐻𝑔𝑒o. He also used 𝐵𝐺𝑒𝑡𝑠uburi to take out the 𝐂𝐵𝐾𝐃, albeit with a little helpful advice from his captain. Zanpakuto. Yachiru's Zanpakuto, Zanpakuto, is one of the most unique blades in Bleach. It has a pink hilt, a flower-shaped guard, and a purple scabbard. Using her Shikai, Yachiru can summon two very intimidating beasts who carry weapons of their own. She then relies on these two to attack her opponents in quick succession. Summoning two beasts with just a Shikai is practically unheard of, and she's never achieved Bankai. It's not like she needed one anyhow with a Zanpakuto this powerful already. When Yachiru attacks an opponent, the smaller creature's attacks precedes her own, while the larger creature attacks follow after. This ensures that even if Yachiru's attack misses the opponent, at least one of the other two will hit, making an attack from Zanpakuto nearly impossible to dodge. 𝗕𝗲𝗰, meaning Dragon Fist, is the blade wielded by 𝐂𝐑𝐲𝐻𝐿 Mosqueda, one of 𝐂𝐻𝐿 𝐬𝐲'𝐬. It looks like a pair of red punch daggers, and it has the ability to collect and discharge energy between the tips, dramatically enhancing Mosqueda's attacks. When he releases 𝗕𝗲𝗰, the weapon turns into a layer of dome-shaped armor that protects his arms, neck, and shoulders. His fists also turn into dragon's heads that can launch energy attacks. 𝗕𝗲𝗰 can also launch beams of orange energy that can easily punch holes through buildings. Mosqueda fought toe-to-toe against Sato and even managed to push him to his limit. The match concluded with both of them developing respect for each other after 𝗕𝗲𝗰's armored, awakened form was basically destroyed. 𝗕𝐫𝐴 is the Zanpakuto that belongs to the 𝗕𝗲𝗃 It's got a green sheath, a green hilt, and a guard that looks like two crescent moons joined together. However, when it's awakened, the 𝗕𝗲𝗃 transforms Nell into a centaur that wields a lance. Nell can then throw this lance at her opponent at great speeds. As it travels through the air, it begins to spin and build up spiritual energy, and when it reaches its target, it acts like a drill, inflicting extreme piercing damage. The technique was even powerful enough to push back Neutra and break his Zanpakuto, which he was using to block the attack. Pantera. Belonging to arguably the most popular character in the series, Pantera is Grimjaw Jaggerjack's Zanpakuto that allows him to fully transform into a primal, feline-esque creature. Not only that, Grimjaw gets massive speed and agility buffs, along with the ability to use sonic waves, fire projectiles from his elbows, and create reishi claw blades which he can use for ranged attacks. His intimidating physique post-awakening made Grimjaw a very real threat to Ichigo during the Arrancar arc, with his body even able to handle one of Ichigo's powerful Getsuga Tenshos.
Leona. Leona belongs to the Arrancar Francesca Mila Rose, who is one of Haribel's Fraixion. In its sealed state, it resembles a regular broadsword. After awakening Leona, Mila Rose gains a slight outfit change and her broadsword changes its size, shape, and color. Even though Mila Rose wasn't that strong, she lasted for quite a while during her fight against Rangiku, which is pretty decent for someone who has no specific techniques or abilities associated with their Zanpakuto. Only 5 more power-type Zanpakutos are left to cover, and after that we'll start covering Unclassified category, which contains some of the most interesting blades in the series. But before that, let's continue with Veruga. 𝗕𝗲𝗏 Lindacruz may look like just another frail Arrancar reject, but he was actually pretty tough thanks to his Zanpakuto Veruga. In its sealed form, Veruga looked pretty gnarly already with its Valchian-type handle and a hollowed circle at the hilt. Its resurrection, however, is another story entirely. Veruga can turn 𝗕𝗲𝗏 into a fully fledged Minotaur-esque monster equipped with a buff body, tusks, and a long mane. As suggested by its looks, the abilities of this form mostly boil down to enhanced strength. With Veruga, 𝗕𝗲𝗏 was able to beat down the likes of Ichigo, although the latter was fairly weakened by that point. This form didn't stand a chance against Zaraki though. Santa Teresa. Santa Teresa not only has a badass name, but also an insane design. Wielded by the almost universally despised Neutra Gilga, this rather unconventional weapon is a deadly scythe with 2 crescent moons fused together. In its awakened state, the blade turned into even longer scythes that resembled the hands of a praying mantis. Neutra uses Santa Teresa for both offense and defense, and is also adept at using his Zanpakuto at different ranges. His awakened abilities allow him to regenerate limbs or weapons, and he also gets a major strength boost. He gave Zaraki a run for his money for a while before the latter adjusted his Reiatsu and struck through his tough skin. In the end, the villain was worthy of receiving a compliment from Zaraki for putting up a good fight, which is no small feat. Reina de Rosas. Reina de Rosas was a Zanpakuto that belonged to Charlotte Chulhorn. As it usually goes, the blade seal formed isn't anything special, just a large katana with a purple handle and sheath. However, when it's awakened, the 𝐿𝐴RNCH�R literally transforms into a Sailor Moon character, looking absolutely unforgettable. White crop top with absurd shoulders, a pink cape, and nothing but white frilly underwear below the torso. This form pretty much enhances all of Charlotte's natural abilities and even allows him to trap himself and his opponent into a giant rose, essentially cutting them off from the outside world. This Zanpakuto came in pretty handy when he was confronting Yumichika during the raid on the fake Karakura town, but eventually Charlotte succumbed to Yumichika's hidden bankai, 𝐂𝐑𝐴RON. 𝐂𝐑𝐴RON belonged to 𝐿𝐴RNCH𝐿, and it was a comically small blade when compared to Pao's size. 𝐂𝐑𝐴RON's awakened form allowed Pao to turn himself into something that resembled a giant whale. It also makes Pao even bigger, enhances his natural abilities, hardens his skin, and even allows him to launch powerful energy blasts. Pao wasn't half bad when it came to using 𝐂𝐑𝐴RON, but couldn't really stand a chance against Sajin Komamura's giant bankai, 𝐵𝐴Mut. Nirge Parduak is a pretty forgettable 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏 who had a silver Zanpakuto that allowed him to transform into a woolly mammoth with green fur. With this awakening, Nirge could easily trample on his foes with his enhanced strength and impenetrable elephant-like skin. He also had an extendable trunk and the ability to launch energy projectiles from his hands. Nirge handled himself fairly well on the battlefield when he was up against Sui, and even managed to tank several attacks from Omaeda. However, he unfortunately met his end when he got distracted during the battle and died swiftly. Okay, that was a lot of Zanpakutos, but now that the power type is fully covered, let's move on to the unclassified Zanpakutos. There's a total of 31 unclassified Zanpakutos in the series, and one of those is Anaconda. Anaconda belongs to one of the 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏, Xian Sunsung. In its sealed state, her Zanpakuto resembles an ordinary Sai. However, upon resurrection, the blade transforms Sunsung into a human-snake hybrid. In this form, she can conjure and manipulate white snakes, and that's pretty much all we know about her powers, as she got quickly destroyed by Yamamoto. Zenbon-Zakura. Zenbon-Zakura is Japanese for 1,000 cherry blossoms, and belongs to the 6th Division Captain, Byakuya Kuchiki. In its Shikai form, the blade transforms into 1,000 very sharp fragments that resemble flower petals, which Byakuya can freely manipulate in the air. These fragments are powerful enough to break through almost any defense, and can even be used to protect Byakuya from sword swings. One weakness of this ability, however, is that there exists a small safe area around Byakuya where fragments can't reach the enemy. Zenbon-Zakura Bankai is pretty similar to its Shikai, but on a much larger scale. When activated, a bunch of swords rise from the ground, which Byakuya can use in any way he wants. He can set these swords in any pattern he chooses, depending on whether he plans to use them offensively or defensively. One of those patterns is called Senken, and it unites the scattered petals into complete glowing swords that trap Byakuya and his opponents inside. Byakuya can then attack a single target with all of his Senkei at once, and it's considered to be his ultimate attack, Suzumebachi. This Zanpakuto belongs to the 2nd Division Captain, Sui Feng, who's a master swordsman and assassin. In its Shikai state, the blade transforms into a gauntlet with a sharp gold blade on the middle finger. The blade can puncture her enemies rather deep, and 2 strikes can potentially destroy an enemy's entire body. It can also be used to administer venom in the victim's bloodstream. In its Bankai form, though, the gauntlet unexpectedly transforms into a gold missile launcher, which is perfect for long-range attacks. These missiles can track their targets, and after a successful hit, they'll create a powerful and massive explosion. These explosions were strong enough to heavily injure Baragon in VG9. Shinso. Belonging to the former 3rd Division Captain, Gin Ichimaru, this Zanpakuto featured a light blue handle and a handguard that resembled the letter S. With his Shikai, Gin had the ability to make his blade glow and extend out for a long distance at super high speeds, which he used to execute hollows from a distance. In his Bankai state, all of the base stats of his Shikai are amplified, and Gin claims that he can extend it up to 13 kilometers in under 0.1 seconds. This makes Shinso both the longest and the fastest Zanpakuto in the entire series. The Shinso's deadliest technique is called God-Killing Spear, and it allows the blade to turn into dust for a split second and administer poison into opponents. Gin had several impressive battles with Ichigo using his blade, and looked nigh impossible to defeat. 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏 is wielded by the 10th Division Lieutenant, Rangiku Matsumoto. In its Shikai form, 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏 turns into ashes that can be freely controlled by Rangiku. This ash can go through objects as easily as a sword could, which makes it deadly for her opponents. Additionally, she can also turn this ash into tornadoes to fight multiple enemies at once. Rangiku used her Zanpakuto brilliantly to hold off the Tres Bestias on her own during the fake Karakura town arc. Murcielago. Ulquiorra is one of the most iconic villains in the series, and his blade, Murcielago, was just as impressive impressive as he was. What looks like a normal katana with a green handle, upon resurrection, turns the 𝗕𝗏𝐻𝐻 into the manifestation of a devil with bat wings and a horned helmet. The Zanpakuto essentially buffs all of Ulquiorra's already broken abilities, but not only that, it allows him to launch black Zeros and tap into a second transformation. In his second form, Ulquiorra gets fur all over the lower half of his arms and body. All of his abilities get even stronger in this form, and he can also use his spiritual power to create a javelin out of his own overwhelming energy. These javelins have incredible destructive power, and in this form, Ulquiorra gave Ichigo the fight of his life, pushing our protagonist to the absolute brink and making him transform into his strongest form at that point. 𝗕𝗏𝗰𝐻𝐻𝐻. 𝗕𝗏𝗰𝐻𝐻 belongs to the current captain of the 4th Division, Isane Kotetsu. Wielded by the last Kenpachi's former lieutenant, this Ice-type Zanpakuto possessed a Shikai that's never really showed its true potential. The only thing we do know about it is that 2 smaller blades protrude from 𝗕𝗏𝗰𝐻𝐻's hilt at 45-degree angles when its Shikai is activated. 𝗕𝐶𝐵𝐼𝐴𝐻 Zanpakuto. The 7th Division captain, 𝗕𝐶𝐵𝐼𝐴𝐻, has a Zanpakuto whose name hasn't even been revealed yet. The blade looks like a normal tanto while sealed, with a red handle and no handguard. In Shikai form, the blade changes appearance a bit, but we don't know if it has any special abilities. However, we do know it's good enough to give Ikkaku a tough time off screen, which means it's probably pretty strong. 𝗕𝗲𝗃𝗃 𝗕𝗃𝗃 belongs to the former lieutenant of the 12th Division and current visored Hiyori Sarugaki. It's a heavy offense blade that features small hearts on the handguard while it's sealed. Her Shikai transforms the blade into a large cleaver and is best used at close range. Although Hiyori hasn't really used her blade for any significant purpose so far, she has taken down quite a few giant hollows with her Zeros. 𝐻𝐵𝐻𝗏𝗏. 𝐻𝐵𝐻𝗏𝗏 belongs to the visored Lisa Yaromaru. It's a Nodachi with a dark blue handle that turns into a giant spear when Lisa activates her Shikai. She can use 𝐻𝐵𝗏𝗏𝗏 to deal consecutive slashing and piercing attacks. 𝐿𝐵𝐻𝗏. Tatsufusa in Joji is a throwaway Shinigami who wields 𝐿𝐵𝗏. Its sealed state resembles a normal katana with a red hilt. Though we know how he activates his Shikai, we haven't really seen its true form. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. Asuka Karakura was the 6th seed of the 3rd Division who wielded 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. He didn't get to show off any of his techniques with the Zanpakuto as he was killed by 𝐵𝗲𝐵 before he was even ready. 𝗫𝗁𝐵𝗀𝗀. 𝗫𝗁𝗫𝗀𝗀 was wielded by Taketsuna Gori, a person who died alongside Asuka. His Shikai turned his sword into a wide angular blade that resembled a cleaver with holes in it. Same as Asuka, he died instantly before he could battle anyone. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 belonged to Riku Togakushi, a Shinigami who died in an instant from Quincy's flames. His blade was a simple katana that turned into a scythe. He never really got the chance to battle anyone with it. 𝗕𝗃𝗃. Belonging to a Squad 0 member, 𝗕𝗃𝗃 is a great Zanpakuto that has very powerful healing capabilities. It's wielded by the Divine General of the East, Tenjiro Kirinji. In its sealed state, the Zanpakuto looks like a small blade attached to a wooden pole. Upon releasing his Shikai, the blade starts to glow brilliantly and can blind Tenjiro's enemies. He used this blade against the Wanderreich while he was defending the royal palace. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 belongs to the god of the sword, Oetsu Nimaya. It's a blade that resembled an average katana, which never really got a chance to show off what it was capable of. Sealed inside a vat of green goo, the Zanpakuto was apparently too sharp to be kept in any sheath. He used this blade against the Wanderreich while trying to protect the royal palace. 𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏 belonged to one of Grimjaw's goons, Ylfort Granz. Granz's Zanpakuto looked like a regular katana that transformed him into an armored brute who's capable of regenerating himself. His resurrection simply buffed his strength and speed stats. He put up a decent fight against Renji, but soon succumbed to his opponent's strength. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. This Zanpakuto was wielded by Xiaolong Kofeng, a member of Aizen's army. He had a rather terrifying resurrection form that gave him bone-like armor and claws that even allowed him to cut through Hitsugaya's Bankai, although the latter was only at 20% power at the time. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 belonged to the Espada Lupi Antonoi. The Zanpakuto had a pink sheath and a pink hilt. In his resurrection form, the blade gave him 8 tentacles that he could use as weapons. All of his attacks revolved around using his tentacles in the same way and aren't all that unique. He put up a decent effort against Hitsugaya and Rangiku and even held them off for a good amount of time during the 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 arc. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. This Zanpakuto was wielded by 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 state. In its sealed state, the Zanpakuto resembles a whip with a disc-shaped blade at the end. Upon resurrection, however, the blade, interestingly enough, transforms 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 into a moth-like being with black wings that's covered in fur. In this form, she can use her wings to inflict cuts and deflect spiritual particles. 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏s wings and arms consume a large amount of her spiritual energy, but she can bypass this issue by removing them from her body. Doing so removes this drain and allows her to focus the remainder of her spiritual power into a single weapon. She used this technique against Uryu but ended up losing the battle and dying to Granz. 𝗫𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 belongs to the 𝗕𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝐴. He's a somewhat forgettable villain, but his Zanpakuto looked like a brown caterpillar with tentacles growing out of it. It gave him the ability to transform into a purple blob that resembles an octopus. 𝗕𝗲𝗄 had the unique ability to devour a dead hollow and receive all its abilities in Reiatsu. This ability allows him to evolve without limit, unlike normal hollows, which is why he's the only Gillian-class Menos among the 𝐵𝐵𝐴. By the time of his confrontation with Rukia, 𝗕𝗲𝗄 claims to have eaten approximately 33,650 hollows and gained their strength. Only 10 more Zanpakutos are left to cover, and at the end of the video, I'll cover possibly the coolest one in the entire show. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝐴. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗄 was a despicable minion serving under 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐼 who wielded 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗄𝗏. The blade had a blue handle and gray sheath, along with an atom's nucleus-shaped handguard. In his resurrection state, the villain transformed into a being with one of the most interesting designs in the series. The lower half of his body becomes a multitude of purple tentacles, while he also gets 4 wings. He could then thicken those wings and wrap them around himself in order to prevent damage. In this form, he could also unleash a massive amount of black liquid from his back. When droplets of this liquid touch an opponent, a copy of them is created that uses their own abilities against them. What's more, his wings allow him to create voodoo dolls of his foes, which he can use to cause significant damage. But even that's not all, because 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 gives Grounds 2 more ridiculous abilities. You see, if Grounds gets eaten by another being, he can invade that being's nervous system and take control of their body. And Grounds' final ability allows him to get completely reborn from scratch if he ever takes too much damage. He does this by planting a portion of himself inside the enemy's body, which later allows him to reincarnate himself by devouring their body from the inside. Yeah, this Zanpakuto is basically like 10 different ones combined. Ultima. Despite how weak he looks, 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 also has his own Zanpakuto. It's a sword composed of reishi that emits purple light and can fire 𝗃𝗄𝗄. 𝗕𝗲 isn't really a fighter and usually tries to launch attacks from far enough to make his escape if things go sour. Brujeria. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝐴 was an Ironclad who met a swift end after coming face to face against Captain Byakuya. He wielded the pink-handled katana with spikes around the rim. Upon resurrection, the blade transformed him into a pink pumpkin-like being from below the waist with eyes all over his body. With these eyes, he could take control of any object he sees, 1 object per eye. He could even take control of the opponent's limbs and control them in order to inflict self-harm. This Zanpakuto also grants 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 a defensive ability to completely cover his upper body and essentially become a sphere. His defense was strong enough to sustain a full-scale attack from Byakuya's Bankai, which is pretty impressive. 𝗲𝗲. 𝗲𝗲 belonged to 𝗲𝗲𝗬𝗲, a menacing-looking figure with the ability to transform into a being with lightning-shaped branches growing out of his back. In this state, he could generate skull soldiers who would obey his every command. These soldiers could also band together to create a wall with their bodies in order to protect Rudborn from strong attacks. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏𝗄𝗏. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏𝗄𝗏 belonged to Lully Ivern. In its sealed state, it looked like a simple dagger which then transformed Lully into a centipede-like creature with appendages. These appendages could secrete a super powerful poison that's strong enough to erode steel beams. She tried to take on Yami during the fake Katakura Town arc, but got her face punched in and was easily defeated. 𝗲𝗲 Zanpakuto. This Zanpakuto has no official name, but it belonged to the Ironclad 𝗲𝗲 Rinker. It had a white sheath and was never really used in battle. Yoroichi's Zanpakuto. Although we know that Yoroichi has a Zanpakuto, she never uses it nor carries it around. We know that she also achieved her Bankai state, but that's pretty much it. Grand Fisher's Zanpakuto. In his Ironclad form, Grand Fisher had a Zanpakuto about the size of a 2-story building. Unfortunately, he never released it and was killed shortly after drawing it. Kiryu Hikifune was the former captain of the 12th Division and now holds the title of Squad Zero's Divine General of the South. Her Zanpakuto was never given an official name. In its Shikai state, the blade transforms into a 2-handed Wukchuan. Her Shikai abilities are unknown, but she did use her blade to defend against attacks from the Wanderreich during their invasion of the royal palace. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏. 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 was the blade that belonged to Berengon Luisenbern, the former god king of Hueco-Mundo. In its sealed state, his Zanpakuto looked like a double-headed battle axe. However, its true form was a lot more terrifying. In his resurrection form, 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 turns Berengon into the personification of death itself, with a flowy black cowl and the crown on his head. When transformed, all of Berengon's base stats are buffed, and he also has the ability to deteriorate objects in his vicinity. Because of this, he's protected from most close-range attacks. For everything that comes within a specific range of him rapidly ages and disintegrates before actually making contact. Another thing 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏 allowed him to do is unleash a black and purple smoke which ages and rots anything which it comes into contact with. And lastly, Berengon could transform his double-headed axe into a black one with gold chains around it. This weapon was powerful enough to cut through Hachi's barriers. And that's it, guys. All 84 Zanpakutos in Bleach explained. But if you still want to watch more Bleach content, click on this video next where I explained all of Ichigo's forms in the show. Go on, click it.